The last thing I did before I walked out of that house was look down at my clothes scattered across the wet concrete. A silk blouse I bought in Chicago. The gray wool coat Marcus gave me our second anniversary. Underwear. All of it. Just lying there on Dellwood Avenue at 7:43 in the morning, while Mrs. Patterson from number 14 stood frozen on her porch with a cup of coffee she forgot to drink. I didn't pick up a single piece. 10 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. The driver stepped out in a pressed charcoal suit, walked around to the sidewalk, and held up a card with 2 words on it. Miss Reeves. He didn't ask if I needed help with my bags. I only had one. He simply opened the door, waited, and when I got in, he closed it behind me like I was someone who mattered. Dorothy was still standing in the doorway when we pulled away. I didn't look back, but I saw her face in the side mirror, and what I saw wasn't victory. It was the very first second of a woman realizing she'd just made the worst mistake of her life. Before we go any further, what time is it? Where you are right now, drop your time and your country in the comments. I want to know who's watching this with me. People always want to know how it started. They want a moment, one clean, specific moment they can point to and say, that's where it went wrong. I understand the impulse. It's neater that way. But the truth is, it didn't start anywhere dramatic. It started the way most things end, slowly, then all at once. My name is Camila Reeves. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Decatur with my grandmother, Nana B., who worked 31 years as a hospital administrator at Grady Memorial and never once complained about the hours. She used to say, Camila, the quietest person in the room, is usually the one running it. I didn't fully understand what she meant until I was about 26. By then, I was already 3 years into building something most people in my life didn't know existed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I met Marcus Whitfield at a charity gala in Buckhead, October 6 years ago, the kind of evening where the centerpieces cost more than most people's car payments, and everyone is dressed like they belong somewhere important. I was there representing a nonprofit our company quietly funded. He was there with 2 college friends, loud in the good way, laughing at something near the bar when I walked past. He stopped me to say he liked my earrings. They were simple. Small gold hoops Nana B left me. I almost didn't wear them that night. We talked for 2 hours near a window overlooking Peachtree Road. He was a contractor, residential renovations, good reputation, genuinely proud of his work in a way that didn't feel like performance. He showed me photos on his phone of a kitchen he'd just finished in Cascade Heights. Marble countertops, custom cabinetry, every detail thought through. I remember thinking, this man pays attention. That was the thing about Marcus in the beginning. He paid attention. He called 3 days later. We had dinner at a small Jamaican place on Campbellton Road that had exactly 7 tables and the best oxtail I've ever eaten in my life. He was on time. He held the door. He asked about Nana B after I mentioned her once in passing, remembered her name, asked how she was doing. Small things. But I was raised by a woman who said small things are the only honest data you ever get about a person. We dated for 14 months before he proposed. I said yes in the kitchen of his apartment in East Atlanta, flour on both our hands, because we'd been attempting biscuits from scratch and failing beautifully. It wasn't planned. He just stopped mid-sentence, looked at me like he'd figured something out, and asked. I said yes before he finished the question. What I didn't fully account for what I told myself I could navigate was Dorothy. Dorothy Whitfield had been the center of her son's world since his father passed when Marcus was 19. I understood that. I respected it genuinely. She was a strong woman who'd held a family together through real grief and that deserved acknowledgement. So I came to every Sunday dinner. I brought sweet potato pie from scratch the first Thanksgiving. I asked about her garden, her church, her friends. I learned the names of her sisters and remembered their birthdays. Dorothy was never unkind to me directly, not in those first 2 years. She was something more careful than that. She was watchful. Every compliment she gave me had a small door left open at the back of it. "That dress is beautiful on you, Camila. You have such an interesting sense of style." The kind of sentence where the second half quietly undoes the first. Every question she asked about my work was phrased just slightly wrong, just slightly diminishing. "And how's that little business of yours coming along?" The little business. I let it go. Every time I let it go, Marcus noticed sometimes. He'd squeeze my hand under the dinner table or catch my eye across the room with an expression that said, "I see it, I'm sorry." And I believed him. For a long time, I believed that seeing it and being sorry was the same thing as doing something about it. We moved into the house on Dellwood Avenue 14 months after the wedding. Marcus found it a solid, red brick colonial in a neighborhood where people still sat on their porches in the evening and waved at each other by name. He was proud of that house. He'd done most of the renovation work himself, refinished the hardwood floors, retiled the master bath, built the deck off the back. His hands were in every room. What neither of us said out loud at closing was that the down payment came from my account. Not our account, mine. Marcus knew. He thanked me quietly that night in private, the way people thank you for something they're not entirely comfortable receiving. I told him it wasn't a transaction, it was a marriage. He nodded and held me, and I believed we both meant the same thing by that. I parked my car on the street. Always on the street, never in the garage. I told myself it was habit. But somewhere underneath that, I think I always knew, don't get too settled into a space that was never fully offered to you. Nana B would have caught that detail immediately. She passed 8 months after the wedding. Pulmonary embolism, sudden, no warning. I flew back from a business trip in Charlotte and made it to the hospital with 40 minutes to spare. She was conscious. She held my hand and said, "You already know everything you need to know, baby. You just have to trust that you know it." I have thought about those words almost every day since. After Nana B died, something shifted in the house on Dellwood Avenue. Not all at once, not dramatically. But Dorothy started coming by more frequently, twice a week, then 3 times. Then I'd come home on a Tuesday evening to find her car in the driveway, and the two of them already at the dinner table like a life had been arranged in the hours I was away. I cooked a 3rd plate. I sat down. I smiled, and somewhere in the back of a quiet room, I kept locked inside myself. A clock I hadn't consciously started began very softly to tick. The first time I noticed the Chiacoa, I told myself it was an accident. We'd been out, Marcus and I, a rare Saturday with no Dorothy, no job site calls, just the two of us at Ponce City Market, walking slow the way we used to before marriage turned every weekend into an obligation. We bought kettle corn we didn't need and sat on a bench watching people pass, and it felt for about 2 hours like the early version of us. We got home at 6:14 in the evening. I know the exact time because I remember looking at my phone when my key wouldn't turn in the lock. I tried it twice, 3 times. Marcus reached past me, used his key, and the door opened immediately. "Must be sticking," he said. I didn't say anything. I went inside, put my bag down, and made a mental note the way I make mental notes, quietly in a file. I don't share with anyone filed under things that are probably nothing but bear watching. 3 weeks later, it happened again. Different key, same result. Mine didn't work. His did. That time I mentioned it directly, stood in the kitchen and said calmly that the lock had been changed and I didn't have the new key. Marcus looked at me with an expression I had not seen before on his face. Not guilt exactly, more like a man who has been caught in the middle of something and hasn't yet decided which side he's on. "My mother had some work done on the door while we were in Savannah," he said. "I keep forgetting to get you a copy made." While we were in Savannah, we'd been gone 4 days. Dorothy had been in our house for 4 days with a contractor doing work on a lock that was functioning perfectly well. Okay, I said. That was all. Just okay. He got me a new key 4 days after that. It worked fine. And if you'd asked anyone watching from the outside, they would have said the matter was resolved. Small miscommunication. Easily explained. Not worth the energy of an argument. But here is what I understood, that I didn't say Dorothy had a key to my house that she had not been given by me. And Marcus had let that happen, then let 4 days pass before correcting it. And in those 4 days had not once mentioned it unless I brought it up first. I filed that too. The physical details are the honest ones. Nana B taught me that. Not what people say, not even what they do in the big moments. The small physical details. Where the car is parked. Whether the mail has been opened before you get to it. Whose dishes are in the drying rack when you come home to a house that should have been empty. In November of that year, I came home on a Wednesday at 4 p.m. I'd moved a meeting unexpected. No one knew I'd be early, and found Dorothy reorganizing my kitchen cabinets. She had taken everything out of the upper cabinets on the left side. My grandmother's serving bowls, the ones I'd wrapped in dish towels and carried from Decatur myself, were sitting on the counter. The blue Le Creuset Dutch oven Marcus gave me for my birthday was on the floor. Dorothy was on a step stool lining the shelves with new paper. A floral print I'd never seen before, had never chosen, had never been consulted about. She looked at me when I walked in, with the absolute composure of a woman who has decided this is her kitchen and is simply waiting for the other person in the room to accept that. "I'm reorganizing," she said. "The way you had it didn't make sense." I set my bag on the counter. I looked at my grandmother's bowls sitting there like they'd been evicted. I looked at Dorothy on the step stool with her floral shelf paper and her expression of perfect, calm authority. "Please put everything back where it was," I said. My voice was level, no heat in it. Dorothy looked at me for a long moment, the look of a woman recalibrating. Then she climbed down from the step stool, picked up her purse from the chair, and left without a word. She didn't put anything back. I put it all back myself, every bowl, every pot, every item back in the exact position I had chosen. Then I peeled up every strip of floral shelf paper and put it in the trash. Marcus came home at 7 p.m. His mother had called him before he walked through the door. I could tell by the particular set of his shoulders when he came into the kitchen, the way a man looks when he's already been told one version of a story and is bracing for the second. "She was just trying to help," he said. "I know," I said. "Dinner's on the stove." We ate. We talked about something else. And I watched him carefully, the way you watch someone when you are trying to determine not what they're saying, but what they're choosing not to say. He never asked if I was okay. He never acknowledged that his mother had been in our home, moving my grandmother's bowls onto the counter like they were clutter. He just ate his dinner. That night after he was asleep, I lay in the dark and did something I had not done in a very long time. I pulled up a contact on my phone, a name in my address book listed simply as RV, and I sent a single text message. "I may need to accelerate the timeline. Not urgent yet, just wanted you to know." The reply came back in 4 minutes. "Understood. Everything is ready when you are." I put my phone face down on the nightstand, listened to Marcus breathe in the dark, looked at the ceiling of a house that had my money in its foundation and my name on none of its walls. The clock I hadn't consciously started ticked a little louder. It happened on a Sunday. It's always a Sunday with families like this. Sunday dinner is the stage Dorothy had spent 40 years perfecting: the right lighting, the right seating arrangement, the right moment to say the things she'd been holding all week. She cooked for hours. The house on Beecher Street always smelled like greens and cornbread by noon, and by the time everyone arrived at 3 p.m., the table was set like a performance. That particular Sunday, there were 8 of us. Marcus's 2 sisters, Renee and Patrice. Patrice's husband, Gerald. Two cousins I recognized but couldn't name correctly without a program. Dorothy at the head of the table where she always sat the seat that was never assigned but was always understood. And me. At the far end, next to Marcus in the chair closest to the kitchen, because Dorothy had arranged the place settings herself. The food was good. It always was. The conversation moved the way Sunday conversation moves in big families, overlapping loud, someone always talking over someone else. Laughter erupting before the punchline lands. I participated. I laughed when it was appropriate, asked Renee about her daughter's school play, complimented the cornbread sincerely because it deserved it. I was good at Sunday dinners. I had been good at them for 4 years. The shift happened between the main course and dessert. That particular window of a meal when people are full enough to be honest and comfortable enough to forget they're in public. Dorothy set down her fork. Looked at the table in general the way a woman looks when she's about to say something she has already rehearsed. "I've been thinking," she said, "about this family, about what's best for Marcus going forward." The table quieted in the particular way tables quiet when they sense a prepared speech. "Marcus works hard," she continued. "He built something real. And I think it's time he had a partner, a real partner, who supports that. Someone who is here, present, not always somewhere else, always traveling, always busy with—" She paused the half-second pause of someone choosing their words very precisely, other priorities. She did not look at me while she said it. She didn't have to. Renee looked at her plate. Patrice reached for her water glass. Gerald found something very interesting to examine on his fork. The cousins had gone still in the way of people who know they're witnessing something, but have decided surviving it requires absolute neutrality. I looked at Marcus. He was looking at his mother. I waited. I gave him a full, generous silence. The kind of silence that is an open door that says, walk through it. Say something. Be the person I believe you are. I had done this before, or given him that silence in smaller moments. And he had sometimes walked through it, and sometimes not. This time, he reached for the bread basket. Then Dorothy looked directly at me for the first time since she'd started speaking. Her eyes were calm, certain. The eyes of a woman who has already won and is simply waiting for the room to confirm it. "You're a nice girl, Camilla," she said. "But nice isn't always enough." The table was absolutely silent. I put my fork down, not with force, with precision. The deliberate placement of a woman who has been waiting a long time for a moment to mean something. "Dorothy," I said, "thank you for dinner. Everything was wonderful." I folded my napkin, set it beside my plate, pushed my chair back evenly. "Marcus." I looked at him directly. He finally met my eyes. What I saw there was not a man who disagreed with his mother. It was a man who had already made his decision and was hoping I would make it easier by leaving quietly. So I did. I picked up my purse from the hook by the door, the hook I had installed myself, because there wasn't one there when we moved in, and I walked out of Dorothy's house on Beecher Street at 4:47 in the afternoon, while the cornbread was still warm on the table. I drove home alone, parked on the street the way I always did, sat in the car for 4 minutes without moving, not crying, not shaking, just letting the silence settle around me the way you let a room air out after something has burned. Then I took out my phone and sent one more message to RV accelerating the timeline. "I need 72 hours. The reply came before I reached my front door. "Already moving. You'll have everything by Tuesday." Inside the house, I went upstairs, opened the closet, looked at the things hanging there, the silk blouses, the structured blazers, the gray wool coat from our second anniversary. My grandmother's pearl earrings in a small dish on the dresser. The framed photo of Nana B on my side of the nightstand, the one I'd moved 3 times because Dorothy kept suggesting it might look better somewhere else. I didn't pack. Not yet. I sat on the edge of the bed in the quiet house, and I thought about a woman on a step stool with floral shelf paper, about a lock changed while I was away, about a fork reaching for bread when a door had been left open, about a man who had seen everything and thus chosen nothing. I thought about Nana B., who had worked 31 years at Grady Memorial and never once let anyone reorganize her cabinets. Then I straightened my back, stood up, and went downstairs to make a cup of tea. Marcus came home at 9:23 p.m. I was reading on the couch. He sat in the armchair across from me, elbows on knees, and said the thing people say whenever they've been rehearsing in the car. "She means well, Camila. She just—" "I know," I said. I turned a page. He went to bed at 10. I stayed on the couch until midnight, reading nothing. Listening to the house breathe around me, the wood settling, the refrigerator's low hum, the particular silence of a place that has your money in its floors and your name on the nothing that matters. By Tuesday, I would have everything I needed. By Thursday, Dorothy would make the last move she would ever make against me. And on Friday morning, a black SUV would arrive on Dellwood Avenue, precisely 10 minutes after she did. Tuesday came the way important days always come, quietly without announcement, looking exactly like every other day from the outside. I was at my desk by 7 a.m. Not the desk at home, the one Marcus had built into the alcove off the bedroom that I had never once used because working in that house felt like trying to think inside someone else's noise. My real desk, the one on the 31st floor of a glass building on West Peachtree Street, where my name wasn't on the door, not yet, but where everything that mattered already knew my address. RV arrived at 8:15. Her full name was Rosalind Vance. 61 years old, retired federal judge, now the kind of attorney that other attorneys called when they needed someone who had already seen everything. She wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck, sat under and carried a leather portfolio that had been resold twice because she refused to replace something that still worked. She had been Nana B's attorney first, then mine. For 11 years, she had been the person who knew every number, every structure, every document that existed in the architecture of my financial life, an architecture that I had been building quietly, carefully since I was 24 years old. She sat down across from me and opened the portfolio without preamble. "Everything is executed," she said. "The transfer documents the property records, the shareholder amendments. All filed as of yesterday afternoon." I nodded. "The house on Dellwood is formally back in the Reeves family trust as of 5 p.m. Monday. The lease agreement is drafted 12 months, renewable $1 per year. His name only, no co-signers. It's ready to countersign the moment you want it active." "Not yet," I said. She looked at me over her reading glasses. "I want to give him one more chance to choose differently," I said. "I want to be able to say honestly that I did." Rosalind was quiet for a moment. Then she closed the portfolio, folded her hands on top of it, and looked at me the way she had looked at me 11 years ago when I was 24, and sitting across from her with a business plan and a number in a savings account that had taken me 3 years to build from nothing. "Your grandmother would have done the same thing," she said. "I know. She also would have set a deadline." "Thursday," I said. "If nothing changes by Thursday, let it move." She nodded, reopened the portfolio. We worked for 2 hours, going through the shareholder amendments, the updated corporate structure, the 3 contracts that had Marcus's company listed as a preferred vendor, and that now required my countersignature to renew. He didn't know those contracts existed in that form. He knew his business had done well the past 2 years, knew the referrals had been consistent and the clients reliable. He had not known, had never asked, had never looked closely enough to ask where those referrals originated. By the time Rosalind left at 10:30, every document was in order. Every structure was correct. Everything that had been quietly, carefully, patiently built over 11 years was exactly where it needed to be. I sat alone at my desk for a while after she left, looked out at the Atlanta skyline, the late October light coming in flat and clean off the glass towers midtown, spread out below in its particular mix of ambition and history. Somewhere south of where I was sitting on a residential street with oak trees and neighbors who waved. Marcus was probably at a job site by now, probably standing in someone's kitchen pointing at a cabinet installation, proud, the way he was genuinely, honestly proud of the physical work his hands could do. That part of him I'd never doubted. It was the other part, the part that reached for bread baskets instead of open doors, that had quietly, steadily broken, something I hadn't been willing to name, until a woman with floral shelf paper climbed down off a step stool and walked out of my kitchen without putting anything back. I went home at noon that day, told no one. The house on Dellwood was empty. Dorothy's car wasn't in the driveway. Marcus was at the job site until 6. I walked through each room slowly, the kitchen with its intact cabinets, the living room with the furniture we'd chosen together, the deck he'd built off the back with his own hands, smooth boards, and even joints, genuinely beautiful work. I stood on that deck for a long time. Then I went upstairs to the bedroom, opened my side of the closet. And I did the thing I had been preparing for without fully admitting I was preparing for it. I selected one bag. A single structured carry-on in dark navy, the one I used for overnight business trips. Into it I placed the things that were irreplaceable Nana B's pearl earrings in their small velvet box. The framed photo from my nightstand, my passport, the slim leather portfolio with my own documents, originals, not copies, one change of clothes, one blazer, my laptop. I closed the bag, set it inside the closet behind my hanging clothes, where it looked like it had always been there. Then I went back downstairs, made dinner, set the table for 2. Marcus came home at 6:18. We ate together pasta I'd made from scratch, the kind of meal that takes time, that says I was here. I made something I was still trying. He talked about the job site, a kitchen renovation in Virginia Highland, a client who kept changing her mind about the backsplash. He was animated in the way work made him animated. Genuine and warm, and entirely like the man I'd met at that gala 6 years ago, holding a phone with photos of someone else's marble countertops. I watched him talk. I listened. I asked the right questions. And when he looked at me across the table, really looked at me the way he sometimes still did, I think part of him saw something in my face that he recognized as a warning but couldn't quite name. He reached across the table and put his hand over mine. "I'm going to talk to her," he said. "I mean it this time." "Okay," I said. I turned my hand over and held his for a moment. Genuinely. No performance in it. Wednesday passed without incident. Thursday morning I woke at 5:47 a.m. to the sound of a car in the driveway. Not the street, the driveway. I lay still, listened. Heard the front door open with a key that wasn't mine and wasn't Marcus's, a sound I recognized from 14 months ago when I stood in a kitchen with a key that suddenly didn't work. Dorothy was in our house at 5:47 in the morning. Marcus stirred, heard it too. He didn't get up. I lay in the dark beside a man who heard his mother let herself into our home before 6 a.m. and chose consciously to stay horizontal. And something that had been holding its breath inside me for 4 years finally quietly exhaled. I got up, got dressed, went downstairs. Dorothy was in the kitchen. She had brought boxes, not the kind of boxes you bring when you're helping someone move. The kind you bring when you've already decided the moving is done. She looked at me when I appeared in the doorway. No surprise, no apology. The absolute composure of a woman executing a plan. "I think it's time," she said, "for you to find somewhere else to be." I looked at the boxes, looked at her. "Okay, Dorothy," I said. I went back upstairs. Marcus was sitting up in bed. He looked at me in the doorway with the expression of a man who has been caught between two tides for so long he has simply decided to stop swimming. I looked at him for a long moment. The whole 4 years of him. The kettle corn at Pont City Market, and the biscuits with flour on our hands, and the hand over mine at the dinner table last night, and every bread basket, and every silence, and every small door left open that he had walked past without going through. "I love you," I said. "I want you to know that was real." He opened his mouth. I went to the closet, picked up the navy bag that had been waiting behind my hanging clothes, walked past him, down the stairs, through the kitchen where Dorothy was opening boxes with the focused energy of a woman who has been planning this morning for a long time. She didn't look up. I walked out the front door into the cold Thursday air and sat in my car on the street. My phone said 6:02 a.m. I sent one message to Rosalind Vance. "Let it move." Her reply came in 3 minutes. "Already done." Then I made one more call, the one that would send a black SUV to Dellwood Avenue in exactly 24 hours. I gave the address, gave the time, gave the instruction I had prepared weeks ago. By the time I ended that call, I could hear Dorothy through the open upstairs window. Hear her moving through rooms, opening closets, doing the things she had been waiting years to do. I started my car, pulled away from the curb. Behind me, on the second floor of a house I had paid for my clothes, were already being moved toward a window. I let them go. All of it. I let it all go. Because I had the one bag that had everything that mattered, and I was already driving toward the rest of my life. I spent Thursday night in a hotel on Peachtree Road, not because I had nowhere else to go. I had 4 other options, within a 15-minute drive. Property's guest suites, a furnished apartment on the 14th floor of a building in Midtown that had been sitting vacant for 3 months because I hadn't decided what to do with it yet. I chose the hotel because I wanted one night that belonged entirely to no one but me. A room with no history in it. White sheets, room service, a bathtub I could sit in for an hour without listening for footsteps above me. I ordered salmon and a glass of wine I didn't finish. Watched the Atlanta skyline from the window. Called Rosalind at 9 p.m. to confirm everything had processed correctly. It had. Then I slept better than I had in 2 years. Friday morning, I was dressed by 6:30. Dark navy blazer, charcoal trousers, the pearl earrings Nana B left me. I had asked the hotel to have a car ready at 7:15, not the SUV, not yet. That was arranged separately already en route to Dellwood Avenue on its own timeline. I ate breakfast in the hotel restaurant alone. Scrambled eggs, black coffee, a newspaper I read front to back the way Nana B taught me. Always know what world you're walking into before you open the door. At 7:31 a.m., my phone rang. Marcus. I let it go to voicemail. At 7:44, he called again. I set the phone face down on the table and finished my coffee. What I knew that he did not yet know was that Dorothy had been at the house since before dawn. I knew this because the neighbor 2 doors down, Mrs. Patricia Okafor, who had my number from the time her water heater failed, and Marcus had fixed it at no charge, had texted me at 6:58 a.m. "Camilla, honey, your mother-in-law is putting things outside. Bags and clothes on the sidewalk." "You okay?" I replied. "I'm fine, Patricia. Thank you for watching out." Then I texted the driver. "Dellwood Avenue, 7:45. She'll be standing outside." He replied, "En route. ETA 9 minutes. I picked up my bag, settled the bill, walked out of the hotel into a sharp Friday morning, the air cold and specific the way Atlanta October air gets dry and thin and full of light. I did not go to Dellwood Avenue. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening there. Had known in some fundamental way since the moment I heard that key in the door on Thursday before 6 a.m. Dorothy had spent the night building herself up to a moment she had been rehearsing for years. The narrative she had written in her head, the unsuitable wife, the outside woman, the one who didn't belong, had its final scene ready, and she was performing it with total commitment. What she did not know, could not have known, was that the scene had already been written past where she thought it ended. I drove to West Peachtree Street instead, took the elevator to 31, made a second cup of coffee at the small kitchen station near the conference room, sat at my desk and opened my laptop, and worked methodically without urgency for the next 40 minutes. At 8:34, my phone showed a text from the driver. Done. She's in the vehicle. Departing now. At 8:51, a second text arrived. This one from a number I recognized as Dorothy's. She had texted me exactly twice in 4 years, both times about Sunday dinner logistics. This text said, "Where are you taking me? Tell your driver to stop this car." I read it once, set the phone down, went back to my laptop. The SUV was not taking Dorothy anywhere. It was never sent for Dorothy. Dorothy wasn't in the vehicle. She was standing on the sidewalk on Dellwood Avenue, watching it leave, watching Camilla Reeves get into the back seat with one navy bag, and not look back, watching a tinted window glide up between them like a period at the end of a very long sentence. Dorothy's text was sent from that sidewalk, from that confusion, from the disorienting experience of watching a woman she had decided was powerless execute something with the precise, unhurried energy of someone who had been planning it since before Dorothy picked up the first box. The text she sent was fear wearing the costume of anger. I understood the difference. At 9:03, Marcus called for the 4th time. This time, I answered, "Where are you?" Not a question. The flat, pressurized voice of a man who has come home to an empty house and clothes on the sidewalk, and a mother who cannot adequately explain the black SUV. "I'm at work," I said. "Camilla." "Marcus." My voice was level, warm even, the way you speak to someone you have genuinely loved and are genuinely grieving. "I'm going to need you to let me have today. I'll be in touch when I'm ready." "My mother." "I know what your mother did." Silence. "I've known for a while," I said, "what your mother was going to do. And I've known for a while what you were going to let her do. I'm not angry. I just need you to give me today." He was quiet for a long time. The quiet of a man standing in a house that suddenly doesn't feel like the thing he thought it was. "Where did you sleep last night?" he said. His voice had changed, the pressure gone something rawer underneath. "Somewhere comfortable," I said. "I'm okay, Marcus. I need you to hear that clearly. I'm okay." I ended the call, not with force, just ended it. The way you close a door on a room you finished with carefully so the latch catches clean. At 10:15, Rosalind arrived at the office. She set a folder on my desk. Inside, the lease agreement for Dellwood Avenue. 1 page. Marcus Whitfield tenant. Reeves Family Trust lesser. Term 12 months. Annual rent $1. Beside it, a second document. The vendor contract renewals. Marcus's company, 3 active contracts, my countersignature required for renewal by November 1st. 11 days away. I looked at both documents for a long moment. "Do you want me to send the lease?" Rosalind asked. "Not today," I said. "Let him have the weekend. Let him sit in that house and feel what it feels like when someone leaves it." She nodded. "The contracts. Hold them." I closed the folder. He needs to understand what he's looking at before I show him what it means. Rosalind sat down across from me, crossed her ankles, looked at me with the expression she reserved for moments she considered significant. "You know," she said, "most people in your position would have left that house the first time she changed the lock." "I know," I said. "Why didn't you?" "I thought about Nana B. About a woman who worked 31 years at Grady Memorial and never complained about the hours. About a voice in a hospital room saying, "You already know everything you need to know, baby." Because leaving before you're ready gives other people the right to write the ending, I said. I wanted to write it myself. Rosalind looked at me for a moment. Then she uncapped her pen and made a small note in the margin of a document I couldn't read from where I was sitting. "Your grandmother," she said without looking up, "was a remarkable woman." "Yes," I said, "she was." Outside the window, Atlanta moved in its Friday morning way traffic on Peachtree, a construction crane turning slow arcs against the sky, the city going about its business with total indifference to the fact that somewhere on a residential street in Southside, a woman was standing on a sidewalk next to a pile of silk blouses and a gray wool coat, and beginning for the very first time to understand the shape of what she had done. I opened a new document on my laptop. At the top of it, I typed a single line, a note to myself that I would look at every day for the next 3 weeks while the rest of this unfolded. You didn't survive this because you were hard. You survived it because you were patient. I saved it, closed the laptop. Then I picked up my phone and made the call that would bring Marcus to my office on Monday morning, not because I had summoned him, but because by Monday he would have no choice but to come. Monday arrived the way I expected it to. Marcus called at 8:02 a.m., earlier than his usual rhythms, which told me he had been awake for a while. I let it ring. At 8:17 he called again. At 8:34 he sent a text that said simply, "We need to talk." "Can I come to you?" I replied. "Office 10 a.m. Take the elevator to 31. Tell the front desk your name." He sent back a single word, "Okay." I arrived at 9:15 and spent 45 minutes doing the kind of work that requires focus reviewing the final amended shareholder documents, confirming 3 wire transfers with the finance team, signing off on a lease renewal for a commercial property in Buckhead that had been pending for 6 weeks. Ordinary Monday morning work. The kind that continues regardless of what is happening in the personal architecture of your life, because the structure you build doesn't pause for your grief. At 9:58, I heard the elevator open down the hall. I did not go to the door. My assistant, a composed young woman named Priya, who had been with me for 3 years, and who had the particular gift of making powerful people wait without making them feel waited upon, brought Marcus to my office at 10:02 and closed the door quietly behind him. He stood just inside the door. I watched him take in the room, the corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 sides, Atlanta spread out below in its Monday morning clarity. The desk solid walnut wide, nothing on it that wasn't meant to be there. The wall to the left with the framed photos, Nana B.S. at her Grady Memorial retirement dinner, the 2 of us at my college graduation, a candid shot someone took of her in her garden the summer before she passed. On the right wall, nothing decorative, just the document frames. Incorporation certificate. 3 industry awards. A letter of commendation from the Atlanta Business Chronicle that I had framed, not out of vanity, but because Nana B. had asked me to promise her I would. And on the glass door behind him, which he had just walked through without fully reading, Reeves Capital Group, Camilla A., Reeves founder and managing director. He turned back to look at the door from the inside. Read it again. Then he looked at me. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat. He was wearing a good shirt. He'd dressed carefully for this, I could tell. Pressed dark trousers, the watch I'd given him for his 35th birthday. His hands were on his knees, and he was doing the thing he did when he was working through something difficult, tapping his right thumb against his thigh in a slow, steady rhythm he wasn't aware of. "How long?" he said. Not "what is this?" Not "why didn't you tell me?" Just "how long?" Which told me he had spent the weekend doing the math, Had started pulling threads: the down payment on Dellwood, the reliable clients, the consistent referrals, the vendor contracts he'd been meaning to look at closely but somehow never had. Had pulled enough of those threads to arrive at the shape of something he wasn't yet ready to name in full. Reeves Capital has been operating for 9 years, I said. I started the structural work at 24. The first major acquisition was at 27. He was still. The down payment on the house, he said, came from a discretionary account within the trust. Yes. The vendor contracts. Your 3 largest clients came through referrals I directed. The contracts require my countersignature to renew. They're up for renewal in 9 days. He absorbed that. The house itself, he said. Slower now. The thumb had stopped tapping. I opened the folder on my desk, slid the first document across to him, the property records for Dellwood Avenue, the Reeves Family Trust, listed as the owner of record, the transfer date stamped clearly in the upper right corner, Monday, October 14th. Last Monday, the day after the Sunday dinner. He looked at the document for a long time. You transferred the house back into the trust the day after you reached for the breadbasket, I said. He looked up. I'm not saying that to wound you, I said. I'm saying it because that was the moment I understood the decision was made. Not my decision, yours. A long silence. Outside the windows, Atlanta moved in its indifferent way, cranes and traffic, and the specific quality of October light on glass towers. How much, he said finally, did you build? Total. I considered the question. Not whether to answer it. I had already decided weeks ago what this conversation would contain. I was considering how to say it in a way that was honest without being cruel. There is a version of this moment that is about humiliation. I had never wanted that version. The trust manages assets across 14 properties, I said. Commercial and residential. The capital management side has 31 active investment accounts. We operate 2 subsidiary companies, one in commercial real estate development, one in private equity. Total assets under management as of last quarter. I paused. Not for effect, because I genuinely wanted him to be ready to hear it. Slightly over $47 million. The number sat in the room. Marcus looked at me across the walnut desk. $47 million. The man who had refinished the hardwood floors of a house he did not own, who had built a deck with his careful hands on a foundation he had not paid for, who had sat at Sunday dinner tables and reached for bread baskets while his wife waited patiently for him to choose differently. He didn't speak for a long time. When he did, his voice had changed entirely. The composed, pressurized tone was gone. What was underneath it was something I had not heard from him in 2 years, something raw and undefended, the voice of a man who has just understood the full dimensions of his own failure. Why didn't you tell me? He said. I had prepared for many of his possible questions. I had rehearsed answers for anger, for denial, for the particular defensive reframing that people do when they've been caught in their own smallness. I had not fully prepared for this one. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because hearing him ask it in that voice cost me something I hadn't budgeted for. I tried, I said. Not explicitly, but I tried. Every time I waited for you to ask about my work, every time I left a door open for you to walk through, every time I sat at your mother's table and waited for you to say something simple, just "This is my wife, and she is enough, and this conversation is finished." I tried every way I knew how to show you who I was without having to prove it. He was looking at his hands. You never asked, I said. 4 years, Marcus. You never once asked me what I was building. The truth of it was as simple and as devastating as that. I slid the second document across the desk. The lease agreement for Dellwood Avenue. His name at the top. $1 per year. 12 months. I'm not taking the house, I said. I'm not interested in taking anything that has your work in it. The floors, the deck, the bathroom tile that was real, and it was beautiful, and it was yours. I want you to keep that." He looked at the lease. "This gives you 12 months, I said. "Renewable at the same rate, for as long as you want it." He picked up the document, read it slowly, set it down. "Why?" he said. "Because I loved you," I said. "And because loving someone doesn't stop being true just because they failed you." He was quiet for a long time. Then he looked up at me, really looked at me, the full, unguarded look of a man who has nowhere left to hide, and I saw in his face something I recognized. The particular expression of someone who has just understood completely and irreversibly the size of what they let go. I looked back at him, without looking away. Outside, a cloud moved across the sun, and for a moment the light in the room changed, flattened and gray and honest, and then it moved on, and the city was bright again. I straightened the documents on my desk. "I'll have Rosalind send the lease to your email," I said. "You can take a few days before you sign." He nodded, stood, picked up his watch from where he had set it on the edge of the desk. He always took it off when he was working through something difficult. I had noticed that in year one and never mentioned it. He walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. "The contracts," he said. "The vendor renewals." "I'll sign them," I said. "That was never about punishing your business. Your work is good. It deserves to stand on its own." He was quiet for a moment. "Thank you," he said. It was the most honest thing he had said to me in 2 years. I nodded. He left. I listened to the elevator open and close, and then I sat alone in my corner office on the 31st floor with the Atlanta skyline through 2 walls of glass, and Nana B's photograph on the wall, and the folder closed neatly on the walnut desk. I thought she would have handled this better. Then I thought, no. She would have handled it exactly like this. I opened my laptop. There was still work to do. There always was. But something that had been coiled tight in the center of my chest for 4 years had loosened just slightly, just enough the way a knot releases when you finally stop pulling against it and simply find the right thread to ease. I had shown him who I was. He had finally seen it. What he did next was his to carry. Dorothy came on Wednesday. I had expected her sooner, honestly. Dorothy was not a woman who sat with uncertainty for long. Uncertainty was something she converted into action, the way other people converted anxiety into prayer. So when Monday passed without contact and Tuesday passed, I revised my expectation and settled on Wednesday. And Wednesday it was. She didn't call first. She didn't text. She arrived at the lobby of the building on West Peachtree Street at 11:14 in the morning. In her good coat, the long charcoal one she wore to church funerals, and serious occasions with her purse held in both hands, the way she held it when she was preparing to say something she had been rehearsing. Priya called me from the front desk. "There's a Mrs. Dorothy Whitfield here. She doesn't have an appointment. She says it's personal." I looked at the window for a moment. The sky was flat and white, the kind of Atlanta November sky that can't decide whether it's going to do something or not. "Send her up," I said. I heard the elevator, heard Priya's measured footsteps in the hall. The door opened and Dorothy walked in and stopped in the center of my office with the same expression she'd worn on the step stool in my kitchen. Absolute composure, absolute authority. The bearing of a woman who has never once doubted her right to occupy any room she enters. She looked around. I watched her look. Watched her take in the walnut desk, the framed documents on the wall, the windows, and the city below them. Watched her eyes move to Nana B's photograph. watched the small, involuntary recalibration that moved across her face, not visible to most people, but I had been studying Dorothy Whitfield for 4 years, and I knew where the adjustments showed. They showed in her jaw, a tightening, a release. She sat down without being invited to, which was exactly what I expected. "I want to understand," she said, "what you think you're doing." "Good morning, Dorothy," I said. "Don't." She set her purse on her knee. "Don't do the pleasantries. I didn't come here for that." "All right," I said. "What did you come here for?" She looked at me directly. The full force of it, the look she had been using on people her entire life to establish that she was the authority in the room, that the room itself had been organized around her, well, that the people in it were there at her discretion. I looked back at her, and here is what I had learned in 4 years of Sunday dinners and shelf paper and bread baskets and keys that no longer worked. Dorothy's look had power only over people who needed something from her. Her approval, her acceptance, her love, or her blessing. People who needed those things felt that look like a hand around the throat. I didn't need anything from Dorothy Whitfield. I hadn't for a long time. Her look landed and found nothing to grip. I watched her register that. Watched her recalibrate again. "You embarrassed my son," she said. "I left a house where I wasn't wanted," I said. Quietly, with one bag, I embarrassed no one. "You walked away from your marriage. Your son walked away from his marriage. He walked away from it every Sunday for 2 years when he chose that table over his wife. I simply caught up with the decision he'd already made." Her jaw tightened. "You had no right," she said, "to keep secrets from your husband. Building all this," she gestured at the office, the windows, the city, "and not telling him. That's deception." "I built this before I met Marcus," I said. "I disclosed to him on our second date that I ran my own business. He never asked for details. I never offered specifics I wasn't asked for. A woman's financial independence is not a secret she owes anyone access to." "You were his wife." "I was," I said. "And as his wife, I paid the down payment on his house, referred the clients that built his business, and sat at your table for 4 years, trying to be included in a family that had decided before I arrived that I wasn't suitable." The word "suitable" landed in the room. Dorothy was very still. "I heard you," I said. "That Sunday, every word. I want you to know that I heard every word, and I watched your son reach for the bread basket, and I made my decision in that moment the same way you made yours." Something shifted in Dorothy's face. Not softness. Dorothy Whitfield did not do softness easily, and I was not naive enough to expect it. But something moved. A hairline adjustment in the architecture of her expression, the way old houses settle in cold weather. "I was protecting my son," she said. Her voice had changed slightly. Still controlled, but the rehearsed quality had dropped out of it. "From what?" I said. She opened her mouth, closed it. "From what, Dorothy? What exactly were you protecting him from?" She looked at the window, the flat white sky. "He's not good with disappointment," she said finally. "He never was. Since his father, since Elton died, Marcus doesn't recover from things the way he should. I watched him with women before you. I watched what happened when it went wrong. She stopped. Her hands had tightened on her purse. "You decided to end it before it could hurt him," I said. She didn't answer, which was its own answer. I looked at this woman, 62 years old, in her good coat, hands tight on her purse. A woman who had held a family together through real grief, and then spent 20 years holding it together so tightly she'd started to mistake control for love. I did not feel what I had expected to feel in this moment. I had expected satisfaction, or at minimum, the clean, hard clarity of being right. What I felt was something quieter than that. something close to sorrow. "He's not 19, Dorothy," I said. "He's 38 years old. And you have spent so long protecting him from disappointment that you built the disappointment yourself." She was very still. "I'm not your enemy," I said. "I never was. I was just a woman who loved your son and kept waiting for you to let that be enough." A long silence. Outside, a car horn on Peachtree, distant and ordinary. Dorothy looked at Nana B's photograph on the wall. She looked at it for a long time. "Is that your grandmother?" she said. "Yes. She looks like someone who didn't take any nonsense." "She didn't," I said. "She also never once made me feel like I had to earn my place in her home." Dorothy absorbed that without flinching, which I respected. She stood, picked up her purse, straightened her coat with the automatic precision of a woman who has always believed presentation matters. "The house," she said. "The lease Marcus told me about." $1 a year, I said. "Renewable indefinitely. I have no interest in displacing anyone from their home." She nodded once, slowly. "Why?" she said. And unlike Marcus's why, which had been about motivation, Dorothy's was different. It was the why of a woman who had spent her life measuring people against a scale of transaction and was trying to find where this one fit. "Because it's the right thing," I said. "And because my grandmother raised me to do right things, regardless of whether they were deserved." Dorothy looked at me for a long moment. Then she did something I had not anticipated, had not prepared for, had not included in any version of this conversation I had rehearsed. She nodded again, and this time it was not the nod of concession, not the nod of defeat. It was something smaller and more honest than either of those things. It was the nod of a woman acknowledging privately and without fanfare that she had been wrong. She walked to the door, stopped. "That woman in the photograph," she said without turning around. "Your grandmother. She raised you alone." "From when I was 9 years old," I said. Dorothy was quiet for a moment. "She did a good job," she said. Then she walked out. I heard the elevator open, heard it close. I sat alone in the corner office for a long time. The flat white sky outside was starting to show the faint gray edge of rain coming in from the west. Down on Peachtree Street, the lunch crowd was beginning to move small figures in coats, the ordinary choreography of a Wednesday in a city that did not know or care that something had just shifted in a room on the 31st floor. I looked at Nana B's photograph. The quietest person in the room is usually the one running it. "I know, Nana," I said. The rain reached the windows slowly, then all at once. I picked up my phone, opened my messages, and for the first time since Friday morning, I typed Marcus's name. "How are you doing?" 3 minutes passed, then 4. Then his reply arrived. "Sitting on the deck. It's starting to rain. I just talked to my mother." I looked at that message for a long moment. "Is she okay?" I typed. His reply came quickly. "She cried." I've never seen her cry, not since my dad. I set the phone down, looked at the rain on the window, the city going gray and wet and honest in the way cities do when the weather strips away the performance and leaves just the structure underneath. I did not reply. Some moments don't need a response. They just need to be let alone to mean what they mean. I closed my laptop, put on my coat, took the elevator down 31 floors to the street, and walked out into the Atlanta rain without an umbrella because I had forgotten to bring one, and stood for a moment on the wet sidewalk with the rain on my face and my grandmother's pearl earrings in my ears and $47 million of quiet power behind me. Then I hailed a cab and went to get lunch. Some days that's enough. The domino that started everything falling was not the one I had set in motion. It was a phone call Marcus received on a Thursday morning, 11 days after I walked out of Dellwood Avenue, 4 days after Dorothy sat in my office in her good coat, from a man named Gerald Osei, who was the senior partner at Osei and Brandt Development, one of the 3 companies whose vendor contracts ran through Reeves Capital. I know the details of that call because Marcus told me later in pieces. The way people reconstruct things, they're still processing not all at once, but in installments, each one dropped when they've found the language for it. Gerald Osei called at 9:47 a.m. Marcus was on a job site in Brookhaven, standing in a gutted kitchen with his project manager reviewing cabinet measurements. His phone buzzed. He stepped outside. Gerald Osei did not call to cancel the contract. He called to introduce himself properly. I realized, Gerald told Marcus, that we've been doing business together for 2 years, and I've never actually spoken to you directly. Everything has moved through Reeves Capital. I thought it was time. Marcus asked what he meant by through Reeves Capital. There was a pause on the line. Your referrals, Gerald said. Your vendor placement. The due diligence documentation on your business, the financial review, the performance assessments, the liability coverage confirmations. All of it has come through Camilla Reeves's office. We've never engaged your company independently. I assumed you knew that. Marcus told me later that he stood outside that gutted kitchen in Brookhaven for approximately 4 minutes after the call ended, without moving. I can imagine it. The job site noise behind him, saws and voices, and the specific clatter of a renovation in progress, and Marcus standing still in it, holding his phone, the full architecture of 2 years, assembling itself in real time into a shape he could finally see clearly. I did not orchestrate what happened next. I want to be precise about that. What I had done was build a structure carefully, legally over years, and what I had done in the past 2 weeks was stop maintaining one of its walls. The consequences of that were not engineered by me. They were simply the natural result of a structure meeting the conditions it was built to survive. Gerald Osei called the second vendor client that same afternoon, a property management company in Sandy Springs. They had a similar conversation. By Friday morning, the third client, a commercial developer in Midtown, whose 4 contracts with Marcus's company represented 40% of his annual revenue, had already called Rosalind Vance to confirm the renewal status. Rosalind, professionally and without editorial comment, confirmed that the contracts were pending countersignature and would lapse at midnight on November 1st, if not renewed. November 1st was in 6 days. Marcus called me Friday at noon. I need to understand the contracts, he said. No preamble. The voice of a man who has spent 48 hours doing the quiet, devastating work of fully understanding his own situation. All right, I said. All 3 of them came through you. Yes, the referrals, the due diligence, the liability documentation. Yes. A pause. For 2 years, he said. For 2 years. I heard him exhale. Not sharply, the slow, controlled exhale of someone managing something large. Were you going to let them lapse? He said. No, I said. I told you in the office on Monday. I'm signing the renewals. Your work is good and it deserves to stand. Then why hasn't Rosalind sent them? Because I wanted you to understand what you were looking at before I signed them, I said. Not as leverage, as information. There's a difference. Another pause. Longer this time. I didn't know, he said, about any of it. The referrals, the clients, I thought I'd built that myself. You did build it yourself, I said. I opened the doors. You walked through them and did the work. No one can take the work away from you. That part was always entirely yours. He was quiet. But the doors, he said. The doors were mine, I said. Yes. I heard him sit down somewhere, the particular sound of a man settling into a chair that holds him. A job site, maybe, or his truck. How long did you know, he said, that this was coming, The all of it. I knew it was possible for about a year, I said. I knew it was likely after the Sunday dinner. I knew it was certain when I heard a key in our front door at 5:47 in the morning. He absorbed that. I should have... He stopped. Yes, I said. You should have. Not unkindly. Just yes, you should have. We both know it, and the cleanest thing we can do now is say it plainly, without dressing it in either anger or apology. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, what happens now? I send Rosalind the signed renewals today, I said. Your contracts are secure for another 18 months. Your business continues. That part doesn't change. And the rest. I looked out my window. The rain from Wednesday had cleared. Atlanta was bright again, the post-rain clarity that makes the city look freshly printed. That's up to you, I said. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not disappearing. But I'm also not going back to what we were before, not because I don't love you, but because what we were before stopped being a marriage somewhere around year 2 and became something I was maintaining by myself. He was very still on the line. I have a lease to sign, he said finally. You do? $1 a year? $1 a year. A pause. Camilla? Yes. The deck, he said. The floors, the bathroom tile. I need you to know I built those for you. Not for the house. For you. I closed my eyes for a moment. I know, I said. I always knew. I sent the signed renewals to Rosalind at 2:15 that afternoon. She filed them within the hour. All 3 contracts renewed. Marcus Whitfield's business, the real work of his hands, the cabinets and countertops, and carefully refinished floors, secured for another 18 months on its own demonstrated merit. The lease arrived in his email at 4:30. He signed it at 4:47. I know the exact time, because Rosalind forwarded me the confirmation with her characteristic efficiency. And I was sitting at my desk when it arrived. And I looked at the timestamp for a long moment, 4:47 p.m., the same time I had picked up my purse and walked out of Dorothy's Sunday dinner, and thought about the particular way life folds back on itself, sometimes rhyming in the small details when it doesn't in the large ones. What I didn't know, what I had not anticipated, and could not have engineered, was what happened at Dellwood Avenue that same Friday evening. Dorothy called Marcus at 6 p.m. He was on the deck he had built with his careful hands, newly signed as the tenant of a house he'd thought was his, and she was calling from her car in the driveway. She wanted to come in. He said yes. They sat in the kitchen. She had brought food, the automatic language of Dorothy Whitfield, the dialect of a woman who does not easily find words for what she means. She put the containers on the counter and stood there, and Marcus sat at the kitchen table, and they were quiet for a long time, the way families are quiet when something has passed that can't be taken back. Then Dorothy sat down across from her son and said the thing she had never, in his 38 years, said directly to him. I've been making your decisions for too long, she said. I did it because I was afraid of losing you the way I lost your father. But I was so afraid of that, I didn't see what I was doing to you. Marcus told me this in installments over weeks later. He cried when he told me. Dorothy apparently cried first, a 62-year-old woman who had not cried since her husband died. 2 years of Sunday dinners and shelf paper and keys changed without asking. And one terrible morning with boxes and silk blouses on a sidewalk, all of it arriving at a kitchen table on a Friday night, as grief the way it had always been, underneath a mother who loved her son so much, she'd turned that love into a wall. Marcus told me he held his mother's hand across the kitchen table. That they sat there until the food went cold. That night after Dorothy left, Marcus walked out onto the deck, stood in the dark with the neighborhood quiet around him, looked at the boards under his feet, the wood he had chosen cut, sanded, sealed with his own hands. He called me at 10:23 p.m. I was still at the office. I answered. He didn't say anything for a moment. I could hear the neighborhood, a distant car, someone's dog, the specific silence of a residential street at night. "I'm standing on the deck," he said. "I know," I said. "I built it for you." "I know, Marcus. I'd like—" He stopped, started again. "I'd like the chance to build something else for you, something better than what I did." I looked at Nanabee's photograph on the wall. "You already know everything you need to know, baby. You just have to trust that you know it." "I know you would," I said. "I believe you mean that." "But," he said. He already knew there was a but, which meant he had been listening finally to the things I hadn't been saying. "But wanting to build something better isn't the same as having done it," I said. "And I've spent 4 years waiting for wanting to become doing. I need to see it become doing before I make any decisions about what comes next." A long pause. "How long?" he said. "As long as it takes," I said. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm not closing any doors. I'm just not walking through one that isn't ready yet." He was quiet for a moment. "Okay," he said. "Just okay. Simple. No negotiation, no pushback, no reaching for the breadbasket. Just okay." And in that single word, in the way he said it without performance or self-pity, just the plain, flat acceptance of a man who has finally decided to stop swimming against the tide and simply find out which direction the shore is. I heard something I had not heard from Marcus Whitfield in 2 years. I heard him actually listening. I sat with that for a moment. Let it be what it was, not a conclusion, not a resolution, not a romantic ending. Just a beginning of something that might, with patience and time, and 2 people willing to do the actual work, become something real. "Get some sleep," I said. "Yeah," he said. "You too." I ended the call, closed my laptop, put on my coat, took the elevator down 31 floors to the parking garage, got in my car, drove through Atlanta on a Friday night, the city lit and moving people out and living restaurants, full the ordinary, magnificent motion of a city that doesn't stop for any one person's story, no matter how significant that story feels from the inside. I drove past Dellwood Avenue. Not to stop, just to see it. The house was lit from inside. Warm yellow light in the kitchen window. The deck just visible at the side, dark boards against the darker yard. The oak tree out front that had been there longer than any of us. I didn't slow down. I kept driving. Some things you don't need to reclaim. Some things you just need to see are still standing. The news reached the wider world the way these things always do, not all at once, but in the particular way water finds its way through a structure, moving through the small gaps, first the ones no one thought to seal. It started with Gerald Osei. Gerald was, among other things, a man who lunched regularly on Fridays at a members club in Buckhead with 6 other developers and investors, the kind of informal gathering that does more actual business in 2 hours than most formal meetings accomplish in a week. He was not a gossip. He was precise, professional, constitutionally discreet. But he was also the kind of man who, when he discovered he had been operating for 2 years, without fully understanding the structure he was operating within, felt a professional obligation to correct that understanding promptly. He mentioned Reeves Capital at the Friday lunch. Mentioned the vendor contracts, the referral network, the scope of the portfolio. Not as gossip as information. As the kind of clarification a serious person offers to other serious people when the picture has been incomplete. By Monday morning, my office had received 4 inbound calls from people I had not contacted. By Wednesday, 2 additional inquiries from developers in Midtown who had heard through the Buckhead lunch orbit that Reeves Capital was worth a closer look. By the following Friday, a profile request from the Atlanta Business Chronicle, not the first time they had approached me, but the first time the approach had the particular urgency of a publication that had realized it was behind on a story. I said yes to the profile. Rosalind raised an eyebrow. "You've said no 4 times, she said. The timing was wrong before, I said. It isn't now. She made a note. Did not ask why the timing had changed. Rosalind Vance was 61 years old and had been practicing law since before I was born. And she understood with the precision of someone who has watched many things unfold that timing is almost always about something other than timing. The profile ran 3 weeks later. 1,400 words. A photograph I approved, the one taken in the corner office. Nana B's photograph just visible on the wall behind me, and a headline that was more dramatic than I would have chosen, but accurate enough that I didn't push back. The quiet architect how Camilla Reeves built a $47 million empire no one knew about. I sent a copy to Nana B's sister in Macon, who called me immediately and cried. I sent one to Rosalind, who replied with a single line, "Your grandmother would have laminated this." I did not send one to Marcus. He found it himself. He texted me a photograph of the print edition, folded open to the page he had bought a physical copy, which meant he had gone looking for it, with a message that said simply, "I always knew you were remarkable. I just didn't know the dimensions." I looked at that message for a long time. Then I replied, "Thank you for saying that." The professional consequences continued to unfold in the weeks that followed, as these things do, when a structure becomes visible that was previously unseen. 2 of the Buckhead developers approached Rosalind about partnership opportunities in a commercial development project in West Midtown. A private equity firm in Charlotte reached out about co-investment in a mixed-use property in the Old Fourth Ward. A woman named Sandra Beaumont, who ran a foundation supporting Black women entrepreneurs in Atlanta, called to ask if I would speak at their annual conference. I said yes to Sandra Beaumont first. Before the developers, before the equity firm, before the Chronicle profile even ran. Because that was the thing that mattered most. Not the 47 million, not the corner office or the framed documents or the walnut desk. The thing Nana B had always understood, and had spent 25 years quietly demonstrating that what you build means most when it builds a door for someone who doesn't have one yet. I gave the keynote at Sandra Beaumont's conference on a Saturday morning in November, in a hotel ballroom in Midtown with 230 women in the room. I wore a navy blazer and my grandmother's pearl earrings. And I stood at the podium and talked for 40 minutes about what it actually means to build quietly, not hiding. Not performing, not waiting for someone to give you permission, but simply doing the work with full attention and trusting that the structure will be visible when it needs to be. Afterward, a woman came up to me, 26 years old. She had a business plan in a manila folder and the specific combination of certainty and terror that I recognized immediately because I had felt exactly that combination sitting across from Rosalind Vance for the first time at 24, with a number in a savings account that had taken me 3 years to build. She asked if she could have 15 minutes. I gave her 45. Her name was Imani. She was building a residential design firm renovation and interior work, high-end residential working-class neighborhood clients who deserved the same quality that Buckhead clients expected. She had 3 completed projects, a 4th contracted, and a business plan that was good, genuinely substantively good, with 1 gap in the financial structure that I could see within the first 10 minutes. I pointed it out. She fixed it on the spot right there at the conference table with her pen and her manila folder, adjusting the numbers with the focused precision of someone who knows how to receive useful information without taking it personally. I liked her immediately. I told her to send the plan to Rosalind. She did that same afternoon before she'd even left the parking garage. Rosalind called me Monday morning. "The girl from the conference," she said. "Yes. She has good bones," she said. Rosalind reserved good bones for things she considered worth serious attention. "I know," I said. "Are you thinking mentorship or investment?" "Both," I said. "And I want her to meet Gerald Osei." Rosalind made a note. The professional world was reconfiguring itself around a structure that had always existed but was now visible, and the reconfiguration had its own momentum. The calls and the meetings and the partnership conversations and the profile and Sandra Beaumont's conference, all of it moving with the particular energy of things that have been correctly built and are now simply being allowed to do what they were built to do. But there was a parallel reconfiguration happening in a smaller, quieter space. Dorothy Whitfield called me on a Tuesday evening. Not to negotiate, not to explain. She called the way people call when they have decided to do something difficult and have resolved not to let themselves talk themselves out of it before it's done. "I owe you an apology," she said. I did not rush to fill the silence that followed. I let her have it. "I treated you like a problem to be solved," she said. "And you were—" She stopped, started again, choosing words with unusual care. "You were my son's wife. You were in my family. And I treated you like a problem." "Dorothy," I said. "I'm not finished," she said. Not unkindly, just, "I need to finish this. I've been thinking about your grandmother," she said. "The photograph in your office. You told me she raised you from 9 years old." A pause. "I raised Marcus alone from 19. I thought that meant I understood something about women who carry things by themselves. But I didn't see what I was looking at when I was looking at you. I saw a competitor. I should have seen a daughter." The last word landed quietly in the room. I sat with it. "I appreciate you saying that," I said finally. "I mean that." "I don't expect," she said. "I'm not expecting you to do anything with it. I just needed to say it." "I understand," I said. "And Dorothy, for what it's worth, I always wanted to be in your family. From the very beginning. That was never the problem." A long pause. "I know," she said. "I know that now." We stayed on the phone for a few minutes after that, not saying much, but not ending the call either, the way people stay on the line. When the hard thing has been said, and what's left is just two people sitting with the weight of time and the particular mixture of grief and relief that comes when it has finally been named. Then Dorothy said goodnight, and I said goodnight, and we hung up. I sat in my apartment, the Midtown place on the 14th floor that I had moved into the week after leaving Dellwood, that I had furnished gradually and with intention that had no history in it yet, but was beginning slowly to acquire the texture of a place where a person actually lived. And I looked at Nanabee's photograph, which I'd placed on the bookshelf across from the window. So the light hit it in the mornings. "What do you think?" I said. She looked back at me with the expression she always had in that photograph, not smiling exactly, but pleased about something. The expression of a woman who has seen something funny in the situation and decided to keep it to herself for now. I laughed. Then I got up, made tea, stood at the window with my cup, and looked out at Atlanta, lit and moving and entirely indifferent to the specific dimensions of any one person's story, and felt for the first time in a long time the particular quality of peace that is not the absence of difficulty but the presence of something solid underneath you, something you built yourself, something that holds. There were still decisions to make about Marcus, about what rebuilding looked like, about whether what had been broken was the kind of thing that healed into something stronger or the kind that simply scarred over and stayed tender. Those decisions were still ahead of me. But for now, on a Tuesday evening in November, in a 14th floor apartment in Midtown, with tea in my hands and my grandmother's photograph catching the city light across the room, I let myself simply be here, present, unguarded, no longer maintaining a structure someone else kept testing, no longer waiting for a door to be held open that I had always, it turned out, held the key to, just here, just mine. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in April, I signed a document that had nothing to do with revenge. It was a grant agreement. $50,000 from the Reeves Capital Community Investment Fund, a structure Rosalind and I had formalized in January, built specifically to provide capital to Black women entrepreneurs in Atlanta who had the talent, the plan, and the work ethic, but not the door. The first recipient was Imani. The second was a woman named Claudette, who ran a catering business out of College Park and had been trying for 3 years to scale into corporate contracts without the financial bridge to get there. I signed both agreements at my desk on the 31st floor, while Atlanta came awake below me in the particular way Atlanta comes awake on April Saturdays, slowly, warmly, the city loosening its collar. Rosalind was there. She had brought coffee and the Chronicle profile laminated, which she set on my desk without a word, and which I understood was her version of a standing ovation. "Your grandmother," she said when I looked up at her. "I know," I said. She sat down. We drank our coffee. We did not talk about the past 6 months, except in the way two women talk about time, when they have both watched something difficult resolve into something that turned out to be worth it, which is to say we talked around it, acknowledging its shape without needing to name every particular. "What's next?" she said. "The West Midtown Development Partnership," I said. "Gerald wants to move to term sheet by end of month." And personally, I looked out the window. Marcus and I had been talking, not every day, not with any formal structure, but regularly the way two people talk when they are trying to determine honestly and without rushing it whether what was broken can be rebuilt into something better than it was before. He had started therapy in February. He had told me that on a phone call, plainly, without fanfare, I started seeing someone. A therapist. "I wanted you to know." I had told him I thought that was good. I meant it. He had also in March completed a renovation project in East Point, a home for a family who had saved for 11 years for the work, and sent me photographs of the finished kitchen. Not to show me, to share it. The way you share something with someone whose opinion you genuinely value, someone you want to see what you see. I had looked at those photographs for a long time. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Smooth joints, perfect lines, every detail considered. The hands of a man who understood that good work was its own kind of integrity. "It's beautiful," I had written back. "The family is lucky." "I was thinking about something Nana B said," he replied. "The thing you told me once, that the quietest person in the room is usually the one running it." I think I finally understand what that means. It's not about power. It's about paying attention. I read that message 3 times. Then I put my phone in my pocket and went back to work. To Rosalind's question about what was next, personally, I said, "I don't know yet. I'm letting it be what it is." She looked at me over her reading glasses. "That's not an answer," she said. "No," I said, "but it's an honest one." She considered that. Then she made a note in her portfolio and moved on, which was exactly why I had trusted her for 11 years. The grant signing finished by noon. I took the elevator down, walked out into the April morning, and drove south on the connector toward the neighborhood I grew up in. Past the apartment complex in Decatur where Nana B had raised me in 2 bedrooms and a kitchen that smelled like cornbread on Sundays. Past Grady Memorial where she had worked 31 years and never complained about the hours. Past the small church on Columbia Drive where her funeral had been attended by people I'd never met. People who came because of what she had quietly done for them over decades, the medical bill. She had quietly adjusted the families she had connected to the right doctor, the young resident she had mentored in 1987, who was now the chief of surgery, and wept at her graveside. I parked outside the church, sat in the car for a moment. Then I got out and walked around to the side garden, a small plot that the congregation maintained, with a bench and a magnolia tree that had been there longer than anyone could remember. I had put a small plaque there after Nana B died. Nothing ornate, just her name, her years, and the one line I could not leave out. She knew what she knew. She trusted what she knew. She built. I sat on the bench under the magnolia. The air smelled like spring-wet earth and new leaves and the faint sweetness of something beginning that you can't quite name yet. A bird somewhere in the branches above me was doing the specific thing birds do in April, that urgent territorial announcement that is somehow also just pure joy. A woman walked past on the sidewalk with a stroller, looked at me on the bench, smiled the small, involuntary smile of two strangers briefly occupying the same good morning. I sat there for a while. I thought about the morning on Dellwood Avenue. The silk blouse on the wet concrete. The gray wool coat. Mrs. Patterson frozen on her porch with her forgotten coffee. The driver in the charcoal suit holding a card with 2 words on it. I thought about Dorothy in my office in her good coat, hands tight on her purse, the hairline adjustment in her jaw when she looked around the room. I thought about Marcus standing in the doorway of my office reading his wife's name on the glass. I thought about Imani and her manila folder and the way she adjusted the numbers without taking it personally. I thought about Claudette in College Park, who had been trying for 3 years to build a bridge she couldn't see the other side of. I thought about the particular quality of the light. That morning, April light. The cleanest light there is, the kind that doesn't flatter and doesn't distort, just shows you exactly what's there. And I thought about what it had cost to build the life I had built. Not the money. Money was the simplest part in the end. Just numbers in a structure you maintain with discipline and attention. The real cost was the patience. The years of Sunday dinners and stepped-over boundaries and bread baskets reached for and doors left open that no one walked through. The discipline of continuing to build quietly while people looked past you. The decision made over and over again, without audience or acknowledgement, to stay in the room and do the work. And not let anyone's inability to see you determine what you were worth. That had been the real work. Not the 47 million. The 47 million was just what the real work looked like when it was finally allowed to be visible. Nana B had done the same work in a different room with different numbers on a different scale. 31 years at Grady Memorial. Casually adjusted medical bills and quietly facilitated appointments. And a young resident in 1987 who became chief of surgery and wept at her graveside because he knew exactly what she had done for him. And had waited decades to say so at volume. She had built quietly. She had trusted what she knew. She had not waited for anyone's permission to be exactly who she was. I had learned everything from her, not in lessons, not in lectures, in the daily observable practice of a woman who understood that your character is not what you declare in the loud moments. It is what you do in the ordinary ones, the small choices, the key you don't take, the door you hold open that no one sees you holding. The work you do at the desk before anyone else arrives, because the work matters whether or not anyone is watching. I sat under the magnolia until the church bells struck 1. Then I stood, straightened my blazer, touched the pearl earrings, my habit. Now the small reflex of a woman checking that the thing that matters most is still in place. I looked at the plaque. She knew what she knew. She trusted what she knew. She built. "I'm trying Nana," I said. The magnolia moved slightly in the April wind. The bird in the branches continued its announcement. Somewhere on Columbia Drive, a car passed with music coming through the windows, something bright and rhythmic, someone's Saturday playing itself out in real time. I walked back to my car, sat for a moment before starting the engine. My phone showed a text from Marcus, sent 20 minutes ago, while I'd been on the bench. "I'm at the house. Fixing the back gate the hinge gave out. The deck still looks good." I looked at that message. Then I typed back, "I know it does. You built it right." A pause. Then his reply. "I'd like to build something right again. When you're ready. No pressure. Just when you're ready." I set the phone on the passenger seat, started the car, looked out the windshield at the Columbia Drive church on its corner, the magnolia just visible at the side. The April light doing what April light does, honest and clean, and showing everything exactly as it is. I thought about a woman on a step stool with floral shelf paper, about a key that stopped working, about clothes on a sidewalk on a wet October morning, and a driver in a charcoal suit and a card with 2 words. About $47 million built in silence and patience, and the daily practice of trusting what you know. About a grandmother who never once complained about the hours. I picked up my phone. "I know you would," I typed. "I'll let you know." Then I put the car in drive and pulled out into the Saturday morning and drove north through Atlanta past Grady Memorial and the old apartment and the connector and the glass towers of Midtown, rising in the April light toward whatever came next. Not running, not waiting, not maintaining a structure someone else kept testing. Just moving forward, deliberately, on my own terms, the way she taught me. I get messages sometimes from women who watch these stories and ask the same question in different ways. They ask, how do you stay patient that long? How do you keep building when no one sees you? How do you survive rooms that were never designed to hold you? I always think about Nana B before I answer. She would have said, you don't survive those rooms by being harder. You survive them by being more certain. Certain of what you're building, certain of what you know, certain of your own worth, in the moments when the room itself seems designed to make you doubt it. Patience is not the same as passivity. Building quietly is not the same as hiding. Waiting for the right moment is not the same as having no power. Some of the most powerful decisions I ever made looked from the outside like stillness. What I want you to take from Camila's story is this: the people who underestimate you are not your enemy. They are your information. They are telling you clearly and repeatedly exactly what they see, and what they see is the version of you they are capable of seeing. That is a limitation of their vision, not a fact about your worth. You do not need to correct their vision. You do not need to perform for it, argue with it, or spend your energy trying to change it. You need to simply know what you know. Build what you are building and trust that structures that are correctly made eventually become visible, whether or not the people who doubted you are prepared for what they see. The clothes on the sidewalk were not the end of the story. They were the last thing that had to happen before the story could finally begin. Know what you know, trust what you know, build.